It's Wednesday, which can only mean one thing. It is time for Top of the Pile. And you're thinking to yourself, Top of the Pile, it sounds, Martin, like you are talking about new comics. And how could it be possible that you're going to be talking about new comics when you recorded this Tuesday night, day before comic book day? There is no way you read any comics. Here's the thing. Top of the Pile is exactly about that. Because every week, I'm going to pick, let's just say, 5 comics that I think you should be reading. Then the following week, I'll see if those predictions actually came true. Now, I do have 5 books that I recommend you pick up this week. But before we do that, let's talk about some news. Which there's not a whole lot of news since the last episode. I mean, there is, but not much that I care about. I did see a couple interesting tidbits. And the first one is Gail Simone doing a Plastic Man miniseries over at DC. It's going to be Gail Simone writing, Adriana Mello on art. She's been doing, or she did, Birds of Prey. And the reason I'm interested in this book is, number 1, Gail Simone. Number 2, Plastic Man. And I gotta tell you, I don't know a whole lot about Plastic Man. In fact, I know very little about Plastic Man. I do know that I enjoy the stuff that I've seen Plastic Man in. I remember, God, I want to say it had to be in the 80s. And it might have been even older than that. But wasn't there a Plastic Man cartoon? I'm pretty sure there was. If you remember the Plastic Man cartoon from the 80s, let me know on Twitter at Geekvine. But Plastic Man's always been really interesting. And I know that he's been playing kind of a bigger role in DC Metal, which, as you may remember from the first episode, I have not been reading. I'm kind of waiting until the last episode drops. Last week, I read a bunch of books, and the Terrifics #1 came out. And for some reason, I totally forgot that it was coming out. I read a bunch of books, and I didn't even have it in my top, 3. Usually that's what I post on social, is my top 3 comics. But I ended up reading it over the weekend. And I gotta tell you, the Terrifics is freaking terrific. So that's gonna be my pick for last week. I know I'm kind of cheating, making a pick, a week after it actually happened. But, God, the Terrifics was so good. I was really impressed. I don't know, man. There was something special about the Terrifics. It's Jeff Lemire and Ivan Reis on art. And it was freaking awesome. It's like, alright, so I've never been a big FF guy. Although I started reading some older FF comics recently. And I know I've had friends of mine recommend me several different runs over the years. I'm trying to finally catch up on those. So whenever I do, I'll share my thoughts on it. But there's something really special about the Terrifics. Because it's almost like, over the years, comics have become so I don't know, there's not a spark in them. You know what I mean? I don't want to overgeneralize, because I think every single week there are fantastic comics. But somehow it feels to me like overall, the number of fantastic comics, and that's not a pun, I just realized that. Not a pun, no pun intended. The number of fantastic comics every week, for me at least, has dropped severely. And I don't know if it's because I expect a lot of my comics. Maybe I expect too much out of my comics. But there's something about the Terrifics that really made it feel rounded and fun, and like stuff was actually going on. Art was great. There was a ton of action. The script was great. The dialogue between the characters was freaking amazing. We were introduced to all the characters. So it's Mr. Terrific, Plastic Man, Metamorpho, and Phantom Girl. And I loved it. It was freaking amazing. Amazing. If you didn't pick up the Terrifics #1 last week, I suggest you pick that up. And I'm sure because of that, it's no surprise that this book was announced. I'm sure that, of course, DC was planning on doing this Plastic Man book before the Terrifics came out. Again, he showed up in DC Metal, so he's kind of become a part of the DC universe again. We hadn't seen Plastic Man in a long time, so it's the first Rebirth appearance that we've had. And now he's in the Terrifics. Now he's getting this miniseries, which, judging by their preview pages, it looks awesome. It looks awesome. It's very cartoony, not quite like, not quite Golden Age art, but It's got that feel with a modern sensibility. And judging by the preview pages that I saw, it does look like it will retell the origin story of Plastic Man, how he went from, I want to say he robbed a bank, maybe? Something like that. He was some kind of robber. Everybody in the 30s and 40s, if you ever read those comics, everybody was a gangster. And it's awesome if you read, like, a certain chunk of those comics. But once you start reading a ton of it, you're like, alright guys, like, let's bring somebody else in here that's not a gangster. Anyways, he went from that to being a hero. He's been in the Justice League. He's been everywhere. Police Comics #1, that was his first appearance. So I'm really looking forward to this. I love Gail Simone. I like the fact that, for a while it's like you had male artists doing everything. And then as we started to diversify, you had male writers writing female characters. You had male characters writing male characters. Female writers came in. Female writers started writing female characters. Then you had minority writers writing minority characters. Now it's like we're finally getting over that stupidity and just letting everybody write whatever they feel they're going to be best at writing. And that's what I've always wanted, right? Because I hate the thing where like, what does this guy know about writing this female character? Like, he's a dude. Like, he's not a woman. He doesn't know about the female experience. Or, like, the same with minorities. Oh, he's not a black guy. He's just an old Jewish white guy. Like, what the hell does he know? And that just always bugged me. So I'm glad that now we have Gail Simone, who is a very established writer. She does fantastic work writing this character. I look forward to it because I think she's got the correct sensibility to give the book the right type of action, the correct type of dialogue, and also that little bit of humor that this book needs to have. So Plastic Man is going to be a 6-issue miniseries starting in June from DC Comics. I suggest you put this on your pull list as soon as you can. I think, in particular for us older fogies who like that older comic sensibility, I'm pretty sure that we're going to have a ton of fun reading this. So put that on your pull list, let your shop know. Since we were talking about the FF a little bit, I do want to suggest you pick up Marvel 2-in-1 when it comes out today. This is issue 4. It's written by Chip Zdarsky, which I'm extremely surprised. I generally don't enjoy Zdarsky stuff. He's a little over the top with the comedy. But Marvel 2-in-1 has been amazing. The art is Valerio Schiti, which I hope that's not how you pronounce it, Valerio. If I mispronounce your name, I apologize. You're not even listening, but it's okay. But with Marvel 2-in-1 number 4, they're introducing new costumes for the Fantastic Four team. Well, I should rephrase that. Marvel 2-in-1 is not the FF quite yet. But this new costume does feature the number 4 prominently on the sleeves. Right now it's just Johnny and Ben Grimm. And they're looking to see where the rest of the team is, because the rest of the team has been gone for years. Marvel 2-in-1 has been something really special. When I first heard about this, it might have been I was a little put off by Chip Zdarsky writing it, but I gotta tell you, stuff that Chip's been doing in this book is just freaking classic comic book storytelling. It is so good. So good. And I'm amazed that I don't hear anybody talking about it. Now, within my circle of friends, I do hear some folks talking it up. I know Ronnie, for example, who does the Absolute DC podcast on the network. He talks his book up quite a bit as well. I'm not sure if Jack is reading it. Does the Ultimate Marvel podcast? I'm sure he is. He's got to be, because I'm reading it, and I'm not a huge Marvel guy, but I love Marvel 2-in-1. I think it's been fantastic. And so this Ben and Johnny story has been really great. And now this new costumes popping in with the 4 on there. I'm really curious because we haven't seen any sort of announcement from Marvel of any sort as to what the future holds for the Fantastic Four. Right? So Ben Grimm hung out with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Johnny was hanging out in the Inhumans book. He was dating Medusa. And now that all that's gone, they've come together to try to find the rest of the team. I gotta tell you, I really hope they find it, and I really hope it makes a big impact for the next Fantastic Four book. And what I really want to happen in this is that they don't turn this into an event. I want them to find Reed and Sue within this book, or at least tease that coming into this book, and maybe lead that into a proper Fantastic Four series where we get the full team back together. And I gotta tell you, I don't know who's gonna write it. I've heard rumors of Donny Cates taking the Fantastic Four mantle. That might be part of the reason why he's dropped out of Doctor Strange and Thanos. But, you know, if it's Chip Zdarsky, I think it would be a solid freaking book. Solid book. And obviously it's going to sell gangbusters, right? Because everybody loves the FF. Everybody loves the FF. The comic market has gotten a lot smaller than it used to be, right? Like the worst selling book of 20 years ago still sells like 10 times what the best selling book of today sells. At least in that, you know, top 300 chart or whatever number they're using now. But obviously it's going to sell gangbusters. And it would be very wise of Marvel to tie in a return of the FF to some sort of announcement into a new movie. And maybe this Marvel 2-in-1 is kind of a plan, like a little sidestep, while the whole Disney Fox takeover deal goes through, which I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but sometimes, you know, big moves like that could take a year or two before they actually come to fruition. I hope that Marvel allows Chip and Valerio to take their time. I gotta say also, Frank Martin's doing the colors, because the colors are freaking amazing. I hope they allow this team to take their time. I don't know if 2-in-1 is billed as like a 6-issue or 12-issue, whatever it is. But if they just let this story ride, let this ride out for 12 months, right? That gives Disney enough time to do whatever they need to do within Fox to rejuggle things, to try to prep a proper Fantastic Four movie together. And slowly tie that in, right? Let this book go 12 issues. When they announce that they're going to cancel this book, say, hey, here's the announcement for the new FF book. We're relaunching with whatever. It's going to tie into the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe based upon whatever happens after the second part of Infinity War, or whatever they're calling that movie now. I'm pretty sure it's Infinity War. I think it'd be awesome. This book has gotten me so excited for what a good FF book could be, and the amount of power that book could have across all types of media. And I'm not going to talk about that now. Next week on Monday, I'll be putting out an episode of this podcast in which I talk about using comics as a medium to jump into other media, in particular Hollywood, but also television, books, podcasts, etc. I'm going to talk about a podcast a little bit later on. I think this has a lot of potential, as long as they do it right. And there's no reason why they couldn't, right? The FF has been gone for years. So why rush it now? I think we've come to a place where a lot of people are a little disappointed or a little upset with the way that Marvel has been doing things. I heard some rumblings about people being upset about the whole Fresh Start thing. I don't see the Fresh Start thing as that big a deal. Sure, like, renumbering again sucks. But, I mean, at this point, like, does the renumbering really matter? They're just picking up the story from where we left off. Just leave it alone. Enjoy the books. Buy the books. Support whatever artist or writer, or whatever colorist, letterer, whoever you want to support. Support those people. I think that's more important right now, especially with the way that the industry is struggling. Anyway, so that'll be out Monday, and I'm trying to get together with somebody else on the Nerdy Legion Network. I want to discuss a little bit about comic book movie league. I'm not going to say who it is. Some of my close friends already know who it is. This person, if he's listening, he knows who he is. But we're going to try to get together and talk a little bit about that, because I think it's an interesting topic. So yeah, Marvel 2-in-1 number 4 is out today. Haven't picked it up? I highly suggest you do. If you're like, Martin, I don't want to pick up a new book with this issue. Look, go back, pick up Marvel 2-in-1, issue 1. I guarantee you that you will love it. If you don't, then I'll give you a public apology on Twitter and on this podcast. How about that? But then you got to let me know. at GeekFight on Twitter. By the way, Marvel 2-in-1 is one of my recommendations, so I'll bring it back up very quickly at the end when I do that part of the show. We're talking about books that are coming out today on New Comic Book Day for March 14th of 2018. I want to briefly talk about Action Comics 999, which comes out today. I have been reading the book. I hope that you have been reading the book. If you haven't, I gotta say, I've been very pleasantly surprised with both Superman and Action Comics since the whole DC Rebirth thing started. And that's really amazing for me because I have never been a fan of Superman. Now, I love the movies, all the movies, the ones people hate, like Superman 3. Not as much as other people. I know at least one person really, really loves that movie. I think that person might have that movie in like top 3, maybe number 1. Like Myers, number 1, right? Anyways, Action 999 comes out. This is the final book for Dan Jurgens before Action 1000, which is going to have a whole plethora of stories from different folks and different strokes. And it's a culmination of Dan Jurgens' work on this character, which may not seem that important to you if you are maybe a fairly new comic book reader. But for those of us that have been reading comics for a very long time, Dan Jurgens has been key in instrumenting a lot of really awesome Superman stories for the past like 30 plus years. Maybe like close to 35 years. Can you imagine working on a character for that long? Now granted, he didn't run Superman for all those 30, 35 years. Still, to have such an impact on a character that even 30 years later, you're allowed to come back, redo this book, take the reins, reimagine things, make it something that people want to buy. Because Superman could be a great character, and I think right now, Superman is probably at the best spot that he's ever been in, at least since I've been reading comics. I've never read any Golden Age or Silver Age or Bronze Age, whatever, Superman. My Superman reading goes back to the early 90s. I gotta tell you, like, there was a lot of great stories to have that character come back, exemplify what he is all about. It's really important for a lot of people. And I think in particular now, with the way that our climate is in the world, it's great to have a character that really stands for something, it means something, but also is relatable. Which is weird because you wouldn't think that a character as powerful and strong and all-encompassing as Superman would be so relatable to a lot of people. But he is, especially now with all the family stuff that has come into play. Lois and Superman's son coming into the book, become a family book. And I was listening to, what podcast was it? Oh, I was listening to the Gotham by Geeks podcast. You should check that out, by the way. I was on the episode 84, and Chris and I will be some Batman collecting stuff as well. I believe we're recording tomorrow. But Daryl said on there, he was talking about Batman and the Signal, and that one thing that he liked about that book is that the main character actually has a family, and that's something that's missing from a lot of comic books. And it's not something that I generally think about, but I thought it was really interesting that he brought it up in relation to that book. So I haven't read the second issue of Batman and the Signal. I only read the first. Wasn't a huge fan. I haven't been a huge fan of what they've been trying to do with the Signal, but I did really love the We Are Robin book where he premiered, Duke. And he's got a cousin in this book, and so that family plays a key aspect in the character's life. And really, that's what has made Superman so great again, is how important his family is to him. And I think about characters, like, for example, my favorite character is Batman. Surprise, if you hadn't heard, I love Batman. But you think about Batman, and there's not really family, per se, Batman. Now, we talk about, like, Batman family all the time. This might be something that I need to discuss on I Am Gotham. Anyways, maybe I'll talk to Chris about it and see what he thinks. There's something about Batman where he's got a Batman family, right? So you've got like Batwoman, Batgirl, bunch of different Robins, Nightwing, Red Hood, Signal, of course, and they all play sort of like a father-son, father-daughter role, and even through like actual relationships, right? So like him, adopting Dick, Jason Todd, or anybody else. It's not quite the same because the family dynamic there is it's very much broken in some respects. Whereas with Superman, that family aspect isn't broken. This is a true nuclear, and I think that's what has made DC Rebirth runs of Superman in action particularly interesting to me. Because really, they brought me back to Superman, so that's exciting. Anyway, so 999 is going to be Dan Jurgens' last issue of Action Comics. We're going to get 1000 after that. I saw something about Action 1001. I thought they were renumbering, but maybe it's just Superman they're going to renumber, and Action will continue. But this is all before Brian Michael Bendis takes over the entire Superman corner of the DC universe. So I'm very excited to read Action 999 today and see how it goes. But this ought to be really interesting. I'm curious to see how he wraps up the story. For those of you that have been reading comics for a while, you might be familiar with this character. If you're a fairly new reader of comics, you may, matter of fact, I'm going to just go out here on a limb and say you have never heard of Nightwatch. Never heard of Nightwatch. But apparently, Sony is planning to move ahead with a Nightwatch movie. Part of me is extremely shocked, because Nightwatch doesn't seem like the type of character that would become very popular in film. I do remember picking up the Nightwatch comic. I don't remember if it was an ongoing or a miniseries, but it was like somewhere maybe like early to mid 90s, I want to say. I could be wrong about the date. But he was a side character to Superman, or just Superman. I'm still on the Superman kick. To Spider-Man. He premiered in Web of Spider-Man 97. And of course, Sony owns the rights to the Spider-Man side of Marvel. That's still the case, even though they made this deal with Marvel to allow Marvel to use Spider-Man in the MCU movies. I don't believe that includes other characters, right? So it doesn't include like Venom, Carnage, Goblins, like all this stuff in Nightwatch. I find that really interesting. Okay, here we go. It was a 12-issue, quote-unquote, miniseries. I guess back then they were all ongoings back then, but it only lasted 12 issues, and I thought it was fine. I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading Spidey back then. I was reading everything that was an offshoot of Spider-Man. But, so Sony's trying to make a Nightwatch movie, which is weird. But I mean, I get it, right? Because they need to try to do as much as they can with the corner of the universe they have. I just find it a little odd, I guess, that's all. Tied into this movie is Spike Lee, which I don't know what Spike Lee has been doing over the last, maybe since the Nightwatch miniseries came out. Mid-90s, but he's supposed to be kind of the man behind the scenes getting this together, and he is going to be directing the film. Sony's going to have Chio Hodari Coker writing the script, which that alone to me is very interesting. So if you don't know who Coker is, he is the writer for Luke Cage on Netflix, and I know that people have been a little harsh on Luke Cage. I believe a lot of that stems from there's two reasons, but I think a lot of it stems from the heavy discussion of racial issues that a lot of people maybe aren't aware of because they haven't lived those kind of situations. But also the second problem was that the season itself seemed somewhat disjointed. Now, the first half you had a particular villain and a particular type of story, and the second half you had a particular villain and separate type of story, and there was kind of a mild connection between the two storylines, but it didn't quite seem right. And even though Luke Cage was kind of a shorter season, than Netflix had been doing with Marvel shows previously. It almost felt like maybe they should have made it shorter, right? And they could have done that in 2 seasons. He expanded it, like done a 6 episode season 1, a 6 episode season 2, based on the material in season 1 page. It is what it is. I think Coker did a fantastic job in the series. I love Luke Cage. I know people don't like Luke Cage. I thought Luke Cage was fantastic. So I'm really curious to see how this goes. And obviously, Nightwatch is an African-American character, so the fact that they have an African-American writer and director tied to this movie is important. And I think it's especially important now. I'm sure some of this is the reasoning for this movie being made. The fact that Black Panther has made over $1 billion since release. I think every movie studio is chomping at the bits to try to find solid African American or some other type of minority character that they can create a proper script with, make a story that really means something to our current socioeconomic atmosphere now, and that will appeal to a wide audience, like Black Panther did. So this could be interesting. I'm not sure what to think about it yet. Again, I haven't read this book in 25 years. I guess he appeared in some stories more recently. I haven't really read Spider-Man a lot, at least not the offshoot stuff. So I haven't seen Nightwatch since. But be on the lookout for the Nightwatch movie whenever Sony decides to put that out. Alright, so before we get to top of the pile, where I'm going to pick the 5 books that you should probably check out this week, I want to talk very briefly about Wolverine the Long Night. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying Stitcher did contact me about doing sponsoring this podcast because we do talk about comic books, and Wolverine the Long Night just so happens to be a podcast about a comic book character. They did email me that, so let me put that out of the way. I will give you a promo code to sign up for Stitcher Premium if you want to check this out. But I want to talk about the podcast itself. So this is not going to be an advertiser per se. When I use the code to support the podcast, that's great. But this is not an advertisement. I heard about Wolverine the Long Night, I want to say maybe like 3 or 4 months ago. It might be a little bit longer that it was first announced. And when I first heard about it, I was a little taken aback because I did not quite understand why Marvel, as successful as their other forms of media are, you can argue about that with the comics, whether they're still successful or not. But there's no doubt, nobody can say that the movies are not successful. Some, yes, more successful than others. But the MCU, overall, is a juggernaut. Top grossing movie franchises of all time. And it's crazy that it happens with nearly every single movie. They just pour the dumb truck of money into Marvel's lap. Well, DC's lap, I guess, or Disney's lap, I guess. So what the announcement was that Marvel was joining forces with Stitcher to do a 10-episode podcast called Wolverine the Long Night. And that's all the announcement was. That seemed really weird to me. I was like, well, why would Marvel want to join with a podcasting platform to do a podcast about Wolverine? Yeah, sure, there's different things they could do. But if you're listening to this, obviously you listen to at least one podcast. I'm sure if you listen to this, you probably listen to, we'll just say 5 to 10. I think that's probably a fairly normal kind of podcast to listen to. I am not a normal person. I listen to close to 90 podcasts. The reasons for that are irrelevant, but pretty much I work a lot. So I listen to podcasts all the time. As time has gone on, there was a little bit more information about Wolverine the Long Night. And I started becoming a little more interested. Because what Marvel and Stitcher are doing is kind of a throwback to stuff that we used to get back in the 30s and 40s. Serial podcasts. Now, I do have the Batman serials. Is that what they were called? I think they were called serials. But it was like a radio drama. Right? So this is before, there was TV, but This is before like people actually had TVs. Before it was convenient to go to a movie theater to watch a movie. So people still relied heavily on the radio for entertainment, whether it's music or news, audio dramas, anything like that. And that's what Wolverine is. It's a throwback to those kind of stories. Now that got me a little more interested. I was taken aback a little bit because this is not technically a free podcast. You don't pay for this one podcast, but you do need to be a Stitcher Premium subscriber in order to listen to Wolverine the Long Night. Now, this is where I put my plug in. If you want to check this podcast out, go to stitcher.com/premium and sign up for an account. When you go on the page, it'll tell you to use the code Marvel. Don't do that. I have a better code for you. Click on the sign up link. It'll tell you automatically get a 1-week free trial if you do the monthly. Or you can do a yearly. I think the yearly is a lot cheaper. I want to say the monthly is $4.99. If you want to sign up for a year, it's like $35, $40, something like that. Now, Stitcher does have other original content, but you can check this out. It's a 10-episode audio drama, an original comic book story told in audio format. Right now, the first 2 episodes are out. When you sign up, you use the offer code ULTIMATE, because Ultimate is way better than Marvel, and also it supports this podcast. But you can check that out with offer code ULTIMATE. And The Long Night is really interesting. So the first 2 episodes are out. I got to listen to them. I got to listen to the first episode a couple, I think. And then now that it's out, the first 2 episodes, I listened to both of them. And it is really engrossing. It's a full cast reading of the story. It's a full audio drama. There's a whole cast of characters. Everyone is voiced by different people. The audio quality is top notch. The story is really intriguing. Really, really intriguing. And part of the reason I wanted to plug it is that Benjamin Percy is the one that wrote this 10-episode podcast audio drama. If you don't know who Benjamin Percy is, he did work on Teen Titans. Most recently, and something that I've been reading, is his stuff on Green Arrow. Green Arrow Rebirth. And if you have been reading Green Arrow Rebirth, I think the book started off a little iffy. There were some places here or there that were also a little iffy, but there's been some like really good stuff in that series. The problem is, I think by the time it got really freaking good, I think a lot of people had dropped off. He's the one that wrote this, and apparently this is something like this story he's wanted to do for forever. I saw an interview somewhere, I can't remember where, with Ben Percy talking about this, and apparently Marvel came to him and said, "Hey, we want to do this thing. Can you like give us a pitch?" Now, normally when a writer does a pitch, it might be like a short pitch, like they might write a couple-page synopsis of what they want to do with the story, like from beginning, middle, and end. They might have like a cast of characters, things like that. Kind of a small treatment to see if they could sell the story. Benjamin Percy wrote like a 40-page pitch for this podcast. Literally like almost the size of 2 comics, just as the pitch to the series. And when I saw that, I was kind of sold. I was like, you know what? If this dude has that much love for Wolverine, that he would, I think he did it over a weekend, he would kill his weekend to write a 40-page pitch, much less a story. I can only imagine how long the story is. Then it's got to be worth checking out. So I did. I love the first 2 episodes. I know some people don't like paying for stuff. You want to wait. So there's going to be 8 more episodes. If you want to wait, we're in March, so I guess to like end of May, and try this Stitcher Premium thing and check out Wolverine the Long Night, then I highly recommend it. It is really, really well done. There's not a lot of places that still do audio dramas, because audio dramas are not as popular as they used to be. In particular everyone just goes to YouTube, right? Like, people don't even read comics. They go to YouTube so people will read comics for them. But I highly recommend you check this out. I'll leave it up to you if you want to do it now, decide to pay for Stitcher, or if you want to wait the 2 months till the series is over and give it a shot. But I recommend it. And then again, you can go to stitcher.com/premium and use the offer code ULTIMATE to support the show. Alright, so one last thing before we get to top of the pile. I know I keep pushing it off. Shame on me, Martin. One last thing. I want to thank everybody who commented on the first episode of this podcast. It is very much appreciated. I'm seeing people share this that I've never talked to before. That means a lot to me. I've seen comic book creators sharing this podcast, so that also means a lot to me. Be sure, haven't done so yet, subscribe to this podcast, because that is important for me to keep doing this podcast, because I want to do it. But I mean, if nobody's listening, then I'm not going to do it. The podcast is now, obviously, we had the RSS feed. You can go on the nerdylegion.com website and subscribe there. But you could also now go to iTunes, subscribe there. You can also now go to Stitcher and subscribe there. And hopefully by the end of the week, we'll be on TuneIn, Google Play, and that's usually the word that I submit to. The first episode is also on YouTube. I don't have the URL because until you get a certain number of subscribers, you can't do like an easy URL. But you can go to YouTube, search for Comic Talk Today. There's no real video. I'm not recording in video yet, but it's still the audio podcast with logo and little sound pleasure thing. The first episode's on there. This episode's on there. Next episode will be on there. Next week, I hope to start doing the video stuff. Whether you're watching video or not, it doesn't really matter to me, as long as you listen to the podcast. While you're at any of these services, be sure to rate this podcast 5 stars. I'm going to rate this podcast 5 stars. And if you want, you can leave a comment, but I don't care if you leave a comment. Just rate the podcast 5 stars. Now, if you hate this podcast, I'm okay with that. But I still want you to give me 5 stars, and then in your comment, you can put, Martin sucks. I hate this podcast. It's the worst. But you get 5 stars, Martin, if you ask me. I appreciate that. Alright, so let's get to top of the pile. This is a collection of books that I have decided to make my picks of the week or reading the books. If this sounds weird to you, that's too bad. But generally, I'm going to try to pick books that a lot of people maybe wouldn't want to pick up, because I think it is really important for everyone to try to get out of their comfort zone and try some new books. So let's talk about these books. First up on the list is going to be Dry Country. This is Rich Tommaso, which if you're not familiar with Rich Tommaso, I highly, highly recommend go and read She-Wolf. It came out from Image last year. It was really something weird and interesting. I believe Rich does, not only does he write, but he does all the art and he does the covers for all his books. I can't remember if She-Wolf was the same. I think it was. But She-Wolf was much darker than this. I'm recommending this because I know that a lot of people really like crime books, and Dry Country is a crime book. It's set in Miami in the 80s, so you know there's going to be some awesome police stuff, maybe some cocaine. I don't know, there's going to be like Miami Vice, but awesome. And it focuses on a young detective who is out to find a missing woman he recently fell in love with. Now, if the romance thing kind of is not your thing, whatever, I apologize. But I think this is going to be good. I don't think there's not enough good crime stories. And I really like Rich's writing style. I like the way he formats his books. If you want to check out something new, something different, the art is very different than anything you're probably reading from, especially the big two. Dry Country is my first pick. Second pick of the week is a book that I've been really curious about as it was first announced, and that is Infidel #1. Now, I'm going to butcher this writer's name. I'm generally pretty good with names. This one, not so sure. It is Pornsak Pichayote. Look, I apologize. Look up Infidel #1 from Image Comics. And the art is Aaron Campbell. I'm going to read the synopsis because I think this might really sell the book. A haunted story for the 21st century. Infidel follows an American Muslim woman and her multiracial neighbors who move into a building haunted by entities that feed off xenophobia. Best-selling editor Pornsak Pichayote makes his comic writing debut alongside artist extraordinaire Aaron Campbell, The Shadow, award-winning colorist and editor Joss. Okay, I love Aaron Campbell stuff. If you have not checked that out, you should check that out. He does fantastic stuff. Check out the cover. Just look at the cover to this book, Infidel #1. Okay? If that cover doesn't sell you, there's something wrong with you. Alright, if it didn't sell you and now you're offended, then I apologize. There's nothing wrong with you. But he loves you. I love you. Thanks for listening. But if the interior art is anything like this, and I've seen preview images, and it's not quite as detailed because obviously you can't spend the same amount of time interior art as cover art. But this book looks awesome. And I know some of you are thinking like, I don't want to have that racial stuff in my comics. Listen, just forget I said that. You want awesome horror story set in a confined space, like creepy demon monsters coming out of everywhere, very dark storytelling. Infidel #1 might be the book. So I will come back to this next week. We'll see if I was right. Next one up, I've already mentioned. I'm going to try not to recommend books like that are into a story, but Marvel 2-in-1 #4, Chip Zdarsky, Valeria Shitty. I can't wait to read this book. I've already talked about it enough, so we're not going to talk about it. But pick that up. Very, very highly recommended. Next up on the list, it's Cold War #2 from Aftershock Comics. Now, if you're familiar with my podcasting, you are very well aware there are a few things that I really, really love. #1 is Valiant Comics. Valiant Central, rest in peace. #2 is Aftershock Comics, the Aftershock Central podcast. #3 is Batman. That's why I do a Batman podcast. That's why I like to talk about DC stuff. So there might be often an Aftershock book on this list. Not always, but maybe sometimes. Anyways, this week I'm definitely putting Cold War #2 on the list. When Cold War #1 came out, it was my pick of the week. Now, I'm very well aware that this book may not appeal to everybody, but there is so much craziness happening in this book. I mean, in the first issue, you're introduced to a character. Have all this crazy stuff happening, right? People get put in cryostasis to, see if in the future we can cure their illness. Except they wake up in the future and they're soldiers for this war between humans and these cyborg things. Anyways, it was awesome. And get almost to the end of the book, and the main character gets brutally murdered, and then somebody else becomes the main character. It was freaking awesome. I loved it. I wasn't expecting it. I love crazy twists and turns like that. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, so this was just totally up my alley. I'm very curious how people feel about the art on the book. Hayden Sherman's art style is very different than what we normally see in similar types of books, but there's something special about the way the book is formatted, the way it looks, everything about it. I just love the first issue, so now the second issue is coming out. I have high hopes that we'll continue to expand the story. Christopher Sabella seems like an awesome dude. I believe we're going to have him on the Aftershock Central podcast, and I may have him guest on this podcast as well. I have promised to have creators on, but I still promise no interviews. See how that works out. #1 pick of the week for me, and I'm going to preface by saying I have already read this book. I will preface by saying I read this book 2 months ago because Zach Thompson and Lonnie Nadler were kind enough to send me copies to read. I know I tweeted about it. I suggested people order the book because I read it and I loved it. And now that it's finally coming out, a week late, by the way. It was supposed to be out last week. There was some kind of issue printing it. There was some kind of error in the book. They had to reprint it, so it was pushed back a week. But it is finally coming out. Come Into Me, #1 is awesome. This is a Black Mask book, and I know some people are very adverse to picking up Black Mask books because Black Mask has a history of delaying their books. But Zach and Lonnie are doing Cable over at Marvel now, if I'm not mistaken. I love the way these guys work together. I love this whole book. It was just the craziest thing I've read so far this year. And it is totally up my alley. It's got little bits of Ready Player One in it. There's bits of that movie Existence from whenever that came out. Who was that? Oh, that British actor. I can't remember his name. I loved Existence, even though it was not a great film. Obviously, Zach and Lonnie love Philip K. Dick, so there's a lot of Philip K. Dick stuff in here. It's gritty sci-fi, techie stuff with odd horror elements mixed into the book. It is fantastic. I'm not going to dive deep into it now because obviously you may not have read the book at the time you listen to this. But Coming to Me, number 1 from Black Mask. I'm going to call it early book of the week. I looked at the books that were coming out this week and I was like, I'm not sure, like anything else might top it. But we'll see, I could be wrong. I'm wrong a lot. But right now, I'm going to call it early. Coming to Me, number 1 pick of the week. We'll see if I'm right next week. But pick this up. It is really, really good. It's got the like weird Cronenberg vibe also, if you're into that kind of thing. Highly, highly recommend. And I think that's going to wrap it up. This has been Top of the Pile, which will be our recurring Wednesday episode of this podcast, Comic Talk Today. I want to thank you for listening. Tomorrow, Thursday, there will be another new episode. It'll be the premiere of Therapy Thursday. What is Therapy Thursday? Don't quite know yet, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Friend of the show, Aaron Bell from the Absolute DC Podcast is going to be first guest on Therapy Thursday. If it works out like I kind of hope it works out, then he will be the regular guest on Therapy Thursday because Aaron has a lot of very interesting things to say, and he also dislikes a lot of things. So I think it'll be an interesting discussion. I think it'll be tons of fun. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, Stitcher.com/premium. The offer code ULTIMATE if you want to check that out. Most importantly, leave an iTunes review, Stitcher review, whatever kind of review. Share this podcast with your friends. Let them know to listen to Comic Talk Today. It's only going to get better. I promise. Thanks for listening. Catch you tomorrow.